the reverse racism. Hi, it's Charlie with That Makes Sense to Me. The only rule here is less videography and more thoughts. I want to talk today about three arguments that are used in the Black Lives Matter debate. The All Lives Matter argument, the reverse racism argument, and the what about black on black crime argument. And the pernicious problem with these arguments is that they have an internal consistency to them. What I mean by that is it makes sense to say them. Like, you can say them and they are logically consistent internally. But the problem with internal logical consistency is it doesn't actually necessarily map onto the external world. Example, all unmarried men are bachelors. The Pope is an unmarried man, therefore the Pope is a bachelor. That's true, but it's not really, because even though it's internally consistent, it doesn't take into account the fact that bachelor has other meanings beyond the internal logic of the argument. And so it's that way of thinking that I want to use to break down those three concepts, or those three arguments today, starting with All Lives Matter. The All Lives Matter argument takes the form of what philosophers call modus tollens, which is if P, then Q, but not Q, therefore definitely not P. It's a reverse logic thing. You can look it up if the details make sense, but the example is All Lives Matter implies that Black Lives Matter implies that Black Lives matter more than other lives. Black lives don't matter more than other lives, therefore Black Lives Matter is wrong. That's a logically consistent statement internal to its own logic. And again, that makes some logical sense, but it's not honest to the larger reality. That's not what's meant by Black Lives Matter. That's never been what's meant by Black Lives Matter. The question was never, do black people matter more than other people? The question is, are black people being treated the same way that other people should that other people are being treated? Second, that brings me to the reverse racism argument. I see, what's his name, Tucker Carlson making this argument all the time, and it's it's masterfully sophistic. He says to people that are on his show, like, but if I were to say the same thing, but I were just to flip the races, wouldn't you call me racist? And people are like, yes, I would. And he's like, haha, reverse racism, and walks away. I like this argument's internal logic too, because it actually kind of leans on the same logic as the other argument. The concept behind this argument is that if you were to switch white and black, then all of a sudden people would be outraged. That's kind of the point. If you were to switch black and white, there would be much more outrage than is currently happening. Imagine if a black cop shot a white person, and there was DNA evidence that the cop had planted a gun in the white person's car, and then there was no indictment. There would be outrage associated with this. That's entirely the point. If you can grasp the logic of the reverse racism claims, then you can in fact grasp the logic of what Black Lives Matter advocates are trying to say in the first place. If you had switched the races of two people involved, it would be an outrageous situation. But because it's white people that are in positions of power, people are outraged because of the historical circumstances that have led to this power imbalance in society. So the final argument that I want to talk about is the what about black on black crime argument. And this one has also a kind of nice internal consistency to it that makes people who say it feel smart because they're being internally logically consistent. The problem is it's also not honest to the larger social context in which these claims are being made. So what do I mean by that? The internal logic is this: if you care about black lives and crime rates are higher in the ghetto, then shouldn't you be protesting the higher crime rates in the ghetto? Why aren't you mad about that? There's so much going on here that this, and breaking down like the levels here, could be an entire essay or book. But for just a couple things. First, quickly, it doesn't follow that because I should be mad about another issue, I can't be mad about this issue, right? The Me Too movement is a wonderful, empowering movement for women. It doesn't mean you can't say, oh, you're not mad about Me Too, so you shouldn't be mad about Black Lives Matter. That doesn't make. You can be mad about different things in different degrees. Different people have different political priorities, and that's fine. So just on the surface, it doesn't make any logical sense to say that you're not mad about violence in the ghetto, and therefore you shouldn't be protesting police brutality. There's no logical validity to that statement, and so that can just be dismissed. And the reason that I want to make this video is it seems to me that if you are willing to say, what about black on black crime? That counts as an implicit admission of the difference in social environments of blacks and whites in the United States right now. And if that logic doesn't make sense to you, then let's just consider the alternative. Suppose you're not willing to admit that social circumstances led to the differing experiences of different races in the United States. You think that's nonsense, and you think the Black Lives Matter people are whining sons of bitches that need to get off the field. Then what would be the explanation for the difference if you don't want to say that the difference in crime rates between the suburbs and the ghetto comes down to social factors, systemic, societal, historical conditions that have led to inequality between races in the United States? What's your explanation? And this is where I think the All Lives Matter crowd really starts to show its hand. And what I mean by that is, if you don't think that social circumstances led to the difference in quality of life of blacks and whites in the United States, what did? And this is why the what about black on black crime argument, I think, resonates so well with Trump's base, which is it plays on white fears that black people are intrinsically more criminal or more dangerous than white people. And that, to me, is ultimately, that's the definition of racism. So there it is. 3 different arguments for the All Lives Matter crowd. They're internally logically consistent, but they're not honest to the social conditions in which they're being made. All lives matter. That's not literally what people are trying to say. Reverse racism, yes, that's in fact the point. If we did switch the races, then there would be outrage, and that's the entire problem. And then what about black on black crime? Don't use the fact that, in fact, you are not allowed to use the fact that there is a qualitative difference on average in between a white life and a black life in the United States. You can't use that as an argument unless you're going to be willing to admit that that's because of social forces that have led to, historical social forces that have led to that difference. And if you reject those historical social forces, I don't think there are any other options than some kind of intrinsic racism, which needs to be fought against at every turn. Hey, so I just want to make a quick end note for this video, which is, who is this video really for? And it's for 2 people for 2 reasons. It's for people who are mulling over this debate and who feel attacked by the Black Lives Matter movement and who feel like they're being called racist in an unjust way. This video is for you in that I want to just sort of communicate that I understand that some of what you're thinking has a logic to it. It makes sense. But the fact that it has an internal logic isn't enough. And this video is to challenge people that are in that position and to sort of help them think through other ways of recognizing that internal logical consistency is not enough in a social context. And then the second actually is for people who consider themselves allies or advocates. And the principle is this, and I'm stealing this from someone else, and I'll cite her below. It's basically useless to look at someone and say, like, you're a racist, in terms of an interpersonal, like, dialogical moment. Like, there's nothing, almost nothing is accomplished except for increases in animosity and, like, widening the political gap between the, like, red team and the blue team. And so this video is an attempt at a kind of reasoning that I wish more people would do, which is recognizing that just because you have a radical disagreement with someone doesn't mean that they don't have a level of internal consistency. And if you just blanket statements say, I disagree with you because you fall into a category like racist or sexist, or like you might be right in saying that, but you're wrong in that. Don't dismiss someone's worldview just because you disagree with everything that they say. There may be kernels of truth inside what people are saying, and if you're unwilling to acknowledge those kernels of truth inside what people are saying, then they're going to know that, and they're going to recognize that you're not fundamentally listening to them. So I'm making this video as a kind of model, hopefully, as a way of partially listening to a group and saying like, look, I hear you and I understand kind of what you're saying, but I still disagree with you. And it's that move that I think separates a lot of times like real interlocution and just like shouting matches on Twitter. And that's one of the things I'm grateful for Gadamer and other philosophers for helping teach me. Cool. Have a great night. I've talked for too long. I will see you in the next one.